Officer Dan here. I wanted to talk about something. So I've been running drift events in Albuquerque, New Mexico for a little over 10 years now. I've seen a lot of people come and go over that last decade of running events, and I kind of wanted to go over how to get into the sport properly. I've seen far too many people jump in with either a project car or a car that makes zero sense for drifting, or something that's just too difficult to actually get running properly to drift. They do either zero events because they never make it there in the first place, or they do one event, break the car sucks, it doesn't drift, it understeers, it oversteers too much, it just isn't right for actually having fun out on the track, which is the whole point of drifting, as you may or may not understand. So what I wanted to do today, and the purpose of this video, was to kind of give people a guide to the cars that I have seen over my 10 years of experience doing this that are the best for getting into drifting in the first place, and maintaining that, and going to all the track days, and supporting all of the guys that run events all across this great country. And let me cover the basics of what you need to do for any of these cars in this list. To start off with, it doesn't matter what horsepower you have. As long as the car moves forward and is a manual transmission, you can have a good time. You need to have a welded diff. You need to have some sort of adjustable coilover. You don't want to be flopping around and dealing with crazy body roll all the time. It's not a good time. You're gonna hate your life. Things to get, a racing seat. And the reason for a racing seat being really high on my list is because after a full track day of holding yourself against the sides of your door and your transmission tunnel, your legs are going to burn, you're going to be tired, and you actually have to put a lot of concentration into holding yourself into place, and that sucks. If you get a racing seat, then you can concentrate on actually driving the car and learning to be a better driver at the same time. So that's why a racing seat's very important. Same with the stock steering wheel. If you have a stock steering wheel, it's very, very close to the indicators so that it's easy to drive and turn on your turn signals and your window wipers and all of that stuff. And it's funny, as I'm watching all these guys drive with stock steering wheels, I watch them turn on their blinkers and turn on their windshield wipers and do all this stuff that is because their hands are going crazy. They don't know what to do in the first place. And a steering wheel that is aftermarket is usually a little deeper dish, so it removes your hands from being away from there to hit that stuff in the first place. Plus it puts it a little closer to your body so you can actually control it. You're not trying to ride like a cholo. You want to be decently close and be able to actually toss the steering wheel around. So that is the short list of things that you need to actually go have fun at a track day. Notice I didn't say huge turbos or superchargers or LS swaps or big horsepower or full Wisefab knuckle kit. You don't need any of that shit. The whole thing about getting into a sport like drifting is to have fun, and you're not gonna have fun if you're working on your car 90% of the time and driving for 10 of it. The more seat time equals more fun, and the better a driver you become. That's when you can start doing those other upgrades. Once you move on from that, the advanced stuff that you can do is a full angle kit of some sort, adjustable arms, you can raise your horsepower, you can gut the car, you can put a cage in once you start getting comfortable with tandem, etc., etc. And that can be said for all of the below cars that I'm about to list. So, that being said, number one on the list, of course, is going to be the Nissan 240SX. Why? Because of how available parts for a Nissan 240SX actually are. You can get them from 20 different companies in 20 different versions, used, new. If you break something, you're going to be able to fix it. The parts themselves are usually relatively inexpensive. You can borrow parts at the track from other people. Say you bend a tie rod, say you bend a control arm. You can usually find 240SX parts at the track. Keep you driving, because that's kind of the key of getting into this sport. You have the combined knowledge of 20 years plus of drifting with this chassis. So if you need setup tips, if you need any kind of advice on this, just Google it, and you will have more results than you can probably read in your lifetime. What's a good setup to start with? KA or SR? Just start with something basic. Make sure it's a manual transmission. Automatics can be done, it's just not as much fun. You're gonna need a welded diff, and that's basically it to go have the most fun and get the most track time at your local events. Number two on my list, gonna be the Nissan 350Z, or Z if you're from somewhere else. Why do you want a 350Z for drifting? They're getting cheaper. You can actually find a fully running 350Z for less than you're gonna find a swapped 240SX, which just kind of blows my mind, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Find one on Craigslist that's beat up and buy it. Go have fun. And they're a really well-balanced car to drive straight from the factory. You don't have to worry about swapping the motor for something with more power because it has more than enough. It is plenty to actually go out and do a whole track day. You also don't have to worry about stuff like overheating because it has a well-designed cooling system that some kid didn't put together in his garage when he swapped a motor over. So you will get more track time than other people. Just bring a 350Z out with a welded diff, and if you can, put a set of coilovers on it, and you will be dialed. Number 3 on the list is going to be the Lexus SC300/400, depending on which one you can find. These are super cheap to buy. I see them pop up on Craigslist all the time for less than 1,500 bucks. The SC400 has a V8 in it, and the SC300 has an NA2J. These cars are basically a Supra that are much longer than a Supra. They use the same suspension components, so anything that fits on a Supra will basically fit on the SCs. The NA2J has plenty of power, and the V8 does as well. You're probably going to get the 15s that came with it, and you can find them all over the place. The only thing that's bad about these cars is going to be finding a 5-speed transmission one. They do exist. I've seen a couple of them, but they are hard to find. Luckily, the swap isn't too bad, or if you really need to, just swap a 1J in there. A really good setup for the SC, which coincidentally is the car that I got my Formula D license in, is going to be leave the motor alone, put a racing seat in it, weld a diff, coilovers, done. Send it. And you can drive all day on that setup. Especially if you're running the stock 15s or 16s that came with the car. Tires are going to be cheap and you can shred all day. The other really good thing about these is that they're long wheelbase, so it makes it harder to spin out. Great car to learn on. They don't have as much angle as a 240SX, but you can cut the knuckles and make it happen. Number 4 on the list, going to be the Mazda FC Rx-7. Like the 240SX, this is a great chassis to start with. It's decently well set up as is. If you can find a turbo one, of course, much better because you have that extra power. The NA ones can be a little bit finicky when you're trying to get those to drift. They do have lots of parts available, so you can actually get that stuff, put it on, break it, and put it on again. The rotaries can be good if they're properly maintained. They got a bad rap for all sorts of reasons, and most of that was basic maintenance. They are getting harder to find in running condition. So keep that in mind when you're trying to go after one of these bad boys. I think they're one of the best looking cars from the 80s that are out there today. So a good basic setup for these is to just get one, put coilovers on it. Those are kind of a must because the coilovers that you're using are probably going to be from the late 80s, so get those things replaced. The seats are actually really good. You don't necessarily need to change those right away. And you want to do some sort of an angle mod, a cut knuckle, whatever you need to find to get a little bit more angle out of these things. Other than that, just make sure you got a lot of oil in it and you have maintained it well. There's lots of rotary specific forums out there if you have any questions about actually keeping it or getting it running in the first place. Or you could just swap a junkyard LS into there and have just as much fun. And one thing you're going to have to get rid of is something called DTSS. Dynamic Tracking Suspension System. So you gotta get rid of that before you bring your RX-7 out onto the track at all, or you're gonna have a bad day. There's a bunch of kits out there for less than 100 bucks, so slap that on before you do anything. And barely squeaking in at number 5 on my list is going to be the BMW E36. Anything really. The 4 cylinders, the 6 cylinders, doesn't matter. There are tons of these out there on Craigslist for less than $4 grand. You can find manual transmissions everywhere. They have epic handling from the factory. They have a decent amount of steering angle. Some of them came with LSD diffs, some of them didn't. If you didn't get one with that, you will need to weld it, of course. A set of coilovers would be nice for these things. Get some angle mods. I know there's a couple companies out there now that actually do it. Chelsea DeNova is an expert on this chassis, so he's put up tons and tons of videos and articles on how to set these things up for drifting. And then just go out to the track and slay. And when they do break, they break expensively. So you probably just want to throw it away and get another one. There's a couple stories out there, guys getting them off Craigslist for less than 800 bucks and bringing them to like East Coast Bash and stuff, which is awesome. Gets you going, and he probably drove more than most of the people out there. Apparently they also rip their diffs out, so keep that in mind. There are a bunch of cars that you can drift. And the reason why I made this list and chose the cars that I did is because over the last 10 years, these are the cars that I've seen drivers progress the most in my series and in other series that I've been to. These cars stay on the track the longest, and the guys that drive them have the most track time out of everybody that's there. And they end up being the happiest about it. You can get a Fox body Mustang to slide, you can get an SN95 Mustang to slide, you can get basically anything that's rear wheel drive to slide. It's just these 5 cars. If you pick one of these and just do the basics, you're gonna have the most fun for your dollar. And that's the whole point of this video. I'm gonna get out of your hair. I may do another video on something else to do with drifting, since I really have nothing else to do right now. And I'm Officer Dan, and that's my top 5 cars that you won't quit after driving your first drift event. Catch you guys later.